we've been talking a lot about rebates and how do they drive behavior. And some say there's a little bit of science and there's a little bit of art in how you design the rebate programs that actually work. So our next speaker is going to talk a little bit about how his company has been working and trying to figure out the most impactful and most, I want to say, almost smartest rebate programs out there. So Ron Murray, can you please join us and talk a little bit about how you did this at One New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, man. Thanks. I don't know about smart. After listening to that, that's a great story, isn't it? I mean, David Jones. Congratulations again. Well done. Yes. So I'll start and lead in a little bit about our journey and where we are. Not quite as advanced as the David Jones journey, but some really good learnings that I hope to be able to share with you today. Just quickly, a bit about me. Yep. So I've been in telcos for about 15 years now. Before that, I was a business strategy consultant for Ernst & Young. And most of the areas we used to focus in on were supply chains. That was always a good seam of gold, I would find, in any consulting engagement. But the other one I used to look at a lot, and especially in telcos at that time, was what we referred to as revenue leakage. And it's good to see some stats, on average between 4 and 8% revenue leakage across the board in the telco. So we used to go after that and look to plug those holes as well. So when I started to get a bit more involved in all of this and joined a company in New Zealand, not the one I'm at right now, we took a big focus on both the supply chain and revenue leakage. But then this whole world of rebates emerged, and the whole world of what we called rebate leakage. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today too. So that's a bit about me, but what we want to do is crafting rebate programs that will absolutely drive results. So I'm going to be putting up quite a bit of information here. Some of it's a little bit, possibly sensitive, but hey, we're all amongst friends, and I think it all resonate in terms of the actual numbers that I'm putting up, because they are actual numbers. But happy to share them because they are real, happens every single day. And that's the thing that still amazes me, that in this day and age we can have so much rebate leakage going on in our organisations. So, as I said, career in business strategy, mainly in consulting, but that led me into large enterprises, both banking and telecommunications, Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand. So managed some small teams, multinational teams, through to my largest team was about 600 people at Spark New Zealand, which was where the journey around rebates actually started. So that's a bit about me. The agenda for today is to take you through a little bit of background about who One New Zealand is, and I'll give you the context, the size, the scale, a bit about our trading partners and the categories that we work in. But it's a technology business, and some of the technology partners we deal with have some pretty complex rebate programs, so we'll talk a bit about that. Across our industry, I've seen it. It is really, really quite confusing and quite immature. So immature in terms of the way we manage them, the way we negotiate them, the way we put them in place, and actually try and drive some strategic outcomes from a rebate program. So there's going to be a bit of focus on that too. The size of the prize, I love that name. Size of the prize, so how big was what we were going after in terms of real dollars? And that's when some of the facts come into it. We didn't overpromise, but so I'm going to put up some things where we talked about a more conservative view and a more ambitious view. So I'll put up some slides around that. And then that made what I call the compelling business case for change. And then the challenges we had about that was how do we then communicate that across a pretty broad business and try and get everyone on board. So the challenges and the stakeholders, And then a couple of last thoughts, and that should do us. Sound good? And you know, as I said, this is all real stuff. It's, there's nothing sort of made up here. So just a quick one. One New Zealand was formerly Vodafone. Everyone heard of Vodafone? Yep. Especially in the UK. So yes, our UK owners sold us about 4 years ago to private equity firms. They came in, did a great job. They could see the value in the assets that we had. We're a massive mobile company in the New Zealand market, but we also had massive fixed network assets, and so they could see some value in that. Another bit of context, we were 1.5% of Vodafone Group's global revenues. I call the rounding error. Rounding error on the end of the world. Vodafone Group sitting up in the UK, how do we get rid of them? Anyway, so we had a couple of great investors come in, and they are really, really focused on long-term asset ownership and long-term asset growth. And therefore we became, for Infratil, we became their single largest investment in this region, and that's been a great start for us. So, bit of context there. Anyway, 2,000 staff, 70 retail outlets, that'll become a little bit more evident later. Multiple cities around the country that we operate in New Zealand. We have a lot of trading relationships backwards and forwards with Australia. I was just stepped out for a contract negotiation with TPG. Everyone know TPG? Yep, good. Just before. And we have 1,000+ suppliers and some really big names there that you probably will understand. So the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles, Cisco, Apple, Samsung, obviously with all the handsets that we provide, et cetera, a few other software companies, and Siena's our major network equipment supplier. A lot of these are done through direct relationships or through channel or distributors. Anyone from a distributor here? Ingram? No. I was going to mention Ingram, but I thought I'd ask first. But you know, we also deal with Ingram. We've also dealt with a company called Westcon, Comstar. NextGen, anyone from NextGen here? No. NextGen is an Australian-based distributor that we have a little bit of work to do with as well. And the reason that'll become apparent shortly is because what we call these sort of multi-tier rebate programs from the original manufacturer through to the distributor, and therefore there's some multi-tiered rebate programs associated with each of them. So we'll have some good conversations. So, yeah. Yes. A lot of this will resonate. And tell me if I get anything wrong. Anyway, so we therefore we do over 2 billion in revenue, so we transact obviously well over 1 billion with our suppliers, and so that's when you look at these potential for rebates. I'll let you do the maths in the top of your heads. The smart people, Jonas is smoking. Yeah, he can do the maths in his own head. It's a big number pretty quickly if you roll out what we would call a strategic rebate program across that entire base. We are far from that. So what were the big challenges in our industry? As I said before, the industry itself is quite immature from a telco perspective. Obviously, the distributors and the large technology providers, both hardware and software, have very sophisticated and very sort of what I call global standards for their rebates. So it's quite hard to negotiate other than your relative tiers, your relative volume tiers. So that's one challenge. But as telcos, we were pretty useless at actually implementing a really robust strategic rebate management program. So the multiple tiers is the one that really got me. And I'll give a couple of examples. I won't name any names, but we had one software company who we worked a lot with, and they provided both a lot of software to us, in the tens of millions per annum, but also hardware. And what we had to do is we had to have certain volume targets, but also certain accreditations. So we had to have skilled people, skilled in deploying, implementing, and managing and supporting their technology. And when we started looking at that, I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. You want trained people to be able to sell, support, and manage their equipment. But when it came to the rebates, if we didn't have a certain number of certified individuals, we would drop down a tier. And all of a sudden, with so many changing staff, we had a gap in what we should have had to qualify for a higher level of rebate. But it wasn't until someone called that out at the end of the year when we're trying to do a big wash-up that it became apparent to us, as in the visibility, that we didn't actually have the right people with the right skills, and therefore we wouldn't get that percentage increase. So I'm going, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And so we've heard a lot today about spreadsheets. We've heard a lot today about information stuck in people's heads. And those rebate programs that we had in place were quite complex, but were not given any form of air or visibility across the various parts of our business. So very, very challenging. And then when we drilled into it, the individuals who were trying to manage it just said, this is just way too hard, it's way too cumbersome. We just don't have the information at our fingertips to be able to do the right management decisions. So it was getting worse at this stage, not better. So the more we started to dig into it, asking about the reporting, that was pretty ad hoc and average. No visibility of any forecasting to give us any understanding of the future sort of trajectory that we're on. Will we get to these next tiers or not? We had multiple parts of our business purchasing from the same company, but none of that was centralised, so we had no central visibility of aggregating all of that volume and having a single conversation. So things were getting pretty dire. We had a pretty substandard contract management process, but that's getting better. Because what we're doing is we went through and audited all of our programs to at least get a baseline understanding of what we had out there. And then renewal management. that was yeah. I've got a couple of more stories about that I'll talk about shortly. And then at the end of the day, what I really got frustrated with was that complete lack of a single ownership or single point of ownership. So we had a supply chain division, we had each individual business units, and we've got about 6 of them, all purchasing but in complete isolation. So we had a lot of challenges, and I think, being at this conference last year, and I learned so much, being able to share my own stories and shed a little tear. You go, yeah, really, it's unreal. But what I want to sort of switch gear into now is, typical change management across any organisation, and the ongoing challenges of just everyday life and large corporates, especially one like ours, and probably most of them. So we had multiple stakeholders we were trying to corral, convince, and get motivated and behind strategic rebate program to drive results. And we felt we had a pretty compelling set of information, a pretty compelling set of examples of lost opportunities, rebate leakage, etc. But the funny thing is, everyone sort of has their own point of view, don't they? They all come in and say, yeah, but I want to do it this way. We had the guy that wanted to do the AI across all of our supplier agreements and run this whole AI program to give us what I loosely said, well, that'll give us a nice baseline. but then what are you going to do? So we had that challenge. We had a massive lack of understanding about the true value of what our suppliers were actually delivering to us. Massive problem. And you know, it's just a blunt instrument. It's just like a discount. Why can't we just get a better discount? Versus driving strategic rebate management conversations, which is a win-win for both parties. That was pretty frustrating. But you know, naive would be one word I'd use for it. Through to just plain being arrogant about it and not actually looking at it, the big picture. As with all business units, we had multiple parts of our business which had other priorities and their own drivers, and you know, they may be launching a new product, they may be doing something else. So rebate management may have been high on our agenda, it wasn't as high on theirs. So that was another view we took, and you know, we respect that, and said at a point in time, when would that point in time look like for you if you were to get pretty serious about it? Through to, just the scarce resources. So telcos have been notorious lately for reducing headcount, chasing down prices across the board, very competitive out there, a lot of cost drivers. So the resources were incredibly stretched, was another major challenge we found. Trying to get anybody with enough time to actually do the analysis was really, really difficult. So that was a bit of a challenge. And then the last point I was going to come to was a bit about, again, it was off the back of the conference last year, where we looked at flipping the conversation, adding to the conversation, not just from a supplier base, but what could we do for our customers? What rebate programs could we incentivise them with? And given, you know, we support and manage millions of customers in the New Zealand marketplace. The business unit I was responsible for, I just did a quick sort of back of the envelope sort of conversation around how much are we spending on discounts and sort of hardware subsidies and things like that. And just quickly, one of our guys came back and said, "Oh, that's about 600,000 a year." I went, and I didn't even know. I didn't even know it was that much. I knew we had a lot of discount programs in place to try and incentivise sales, but again, I thought it was a really blunt instrument for what was an opportunity, in fact, for us to actually say, if we give you this rebate incentive, will you sell more? And if you get through these tiers, will you sell more? Had a chat to some other parts of our organisation. We use innovation funds, we used hardware subsidies, we used straight discounting, etc., etc. None of which were driving that sort of classic win-win and for both sides of our organisation. So when we looked at flipping that business case to and revenue growth and not giving away so much discount, other parts of the business started to get really quite interested. So that is our next big focus area. So just quickly summarising on some of those challenges. The original business case that went up was a big bang. Said come back more ambitious, came back more ambitious but didn't have the buy-in from the various business groups. So said, well, therefore, a phased approach is going to be way more palatable to the whole organisation, make it much easier for everyone to buy in, and starting with where the need was most. So our key part of our business is procurement services. So it's doing about 50 million a year, aspirations to drive that to about 100 million a year. Over 50% of their margin comes from rebates, so that was a big focus, and they were the natural place to start. The other side of that is if they could prove the business case, irrefutably, it would make way more sense to the rest of the organisation, because a lot of the same partners and suppliers that they would be dealing with also sell to other parts of our organisation. So it became a real, if you just line up all of those things, it became a win-win-win all across our organisation. So